Mazel Tov Shmuel.
Thank you.
I was looking for you after Shachris yesterday.
Which Shachris?
The 7 o'clock Shachris.
I took a Shabbos after the Chasana. I took a Shabbos afternoon nap, 2.5 hours, and I took the rope to shul, and I can't listen to Yosy, and then I went to sleep for 2 hours. I went to sleep from 7:30 to 9:30.
Good for you.
Okay, I believe today's daf is daf Nun, and we're up to Nun of an Aleph, and we got up to we actually still at the bottom of Mem Testament base, and we had a discussion about chimtza and bar chimtza. That chimtza is the type of chalev that would not plug a hole, and bar chimtza is the type of chalev that would plug a hole. And I think it was Rav Nachman said, I don't know which is which. Because he said, I heard from my Rebbe that one plugs and one doesn't plug. That's one discussion we had. Prior to that, we had a machlokes about a certain chalev. And let me actually go back to Mem Tessel and base, so we'll actually be able to look at it inside. This is the Mem Testament base. So the Gemara says, there's chimtza and bar chimtza. It was Rav. Rav said, I heard from Rav Nachman that there's chimtza and bar chimtza, and one plugs, one doesn't plug, but I don't know which one. And then he said, we know that bar chimtza is the one that works, because odev koyach ha'av mikoyach haben. Now, we also have a machlokes by a certain chalev if we're allowed to eat it or not. And we had a machlokes, I believe, between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. So let me see where that is. But in the meantime, let's see the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Toshma, the Omer Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, Inu, those people from Eretz Yisrael, so we're talking about a certain chalev that's on the keva, and those people from Eretz Yisrael, mechalach, they eat it, meaning they hold it's not chalev, they hold it's shuman, and therefore, surely it also plugs a hole in the keva in what it's surrounding. Now going back to Nun Amud Aleph, but here in Bavel, mistam nami loisasim. If in Eretz Yisrael they're even eating it al shuman, so even though we're makpid on it and we're choshed that it's chaylev and we don't eat it, but if a zoyvai to say that it won't even plug a hole, that doesn't make sense. So the question is, what chaylev was Rav Nachman referring to when he said there's a chalev that they eat, we don't eat, yet we would still at least agree that it plugs a hole. Zok to Gemara, the akshasa kula alma pligi da aser. The keva is like a big sausage. It's a big sausage or a big banana without pointy ends. The akshasa is the bow. It's like as in the bow and arrow. So the fat that's on the underside of this round stomach, everybody agrees that is aser, that's chalev. The chalev that's on the inside or on the top of the stomach is a smaller amount of chalev there. That's where there would be a machlokes. Therefore, we have a machlokes. We had a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Akiva said earlier that what is the krum that's osir? Tois of krum v'niklaf aser. The only chaylev that's aser is chaylev that's also in a bag. I sent out a video yesterday, and Mr. Vashit clearly shows that bag. It's a layer of fabric, completely removable. So according to Rabbi Kiva, he would hold that dafka that's aser, but if it's just that it peels off, but it's not its own bag, then it's not aser. So Zomara, the akshasa kula alma pligi da aser. Everybody agrees that is chaylev. Ki pligi, where is their machlokes? Rabbi Kiva and the Chachamim that we discussed yesterday, the ayasra on the top. So based on that, we're talking about a certain chaylev that others some eat and some don't eat, and even those who don't eat it, at least it's still going to plug a hole in the keva that it's supporting. So therefore, you could say that the machlokes, the akshasa kulam lepligi da aser, everybody holds that's chaylev. So that's not a discussion. Keep pligi da yasra. The machlokes is by the yasra, which is the chaylev on the top. There, we could say that Rabbi Kiva held that it was not chaylev, and that's what the Bnei Eretz Yisrael held. The Bnei Bavel held like Yishmael, who held that it was chaylev, and therefore they didn't eat it. But if a zoyvite, they at least held that it would plug a hole. So it makes perfect sense. So now you know what your chimtza and bar chimtza is. Chimtza is loisasum. That's the chaylev that's at the bottom that everybody holds to be chaylev. That's not sasum. Bar chimtza is the chaylev that's on top of the keva, where there's a machlokes between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel, or between the Bnei Eretz Yisrael and the Bnei Bavel, if you're allowed to eat that, but everybody agrees that it would at least plug a hole. However, Ikad Amri, there are those who learn that the Yasra Kula Amalek Pligi the Shari. Everybody holds that the chaylev on top is not chaylev, it's really shuman and it's mutter. Keep the dakshasa. They're only arguing on the bottom chaylev. Now, if you hold like that, then we don't have an explanation of chimtza and bar chimtza, because if everybody holds that the top is not chaylev and the whole machlokes is on the bottom, we need to find a chaylev that for sure would not plug, and then a chaylev that would plug. But if you hold that the chaylev that's on top, the shari, so then that for sure would plug, and at the bottom there's a shaylev would plug. So that wouldn't fit in so good. Lefi the machlokes Rabbi Kiva and Rabban, that would only fit in according to Rabbi Kiva. Like Rav said, you can actually trim it. You could trim the fat on top, and you could use it because it would be considered to be shumim. So you don't want to take any chaylev near it because that might be chaylev that's aser. So if you trim that little area of fat that's on top, then you would be able to use it. Omar Bavia, Havakim the Kamed Rav Ami. I was in front of Rav Ami, and come to v'havulei v'achal. They actually trimmed that piece of fat, that yasra fat from on top of the keva. They trimmed it for him, and they gave it to him, and he ate it. So he clearly holds, like the second nusach, where everybody agrees that that's allowed to be eaten. Shamed Rav Chanina, Havakoi Kamed Rav Chanina. The shamis of Rav Chanina was standing in front of Rav Chanina. Omar lay, and Rav Chanina instructed the shamis, kamoitz, trim that fat on top of the keva, havli, and give it to me, the echor, because I want to eat it. He saw that his shamis was hesitant to prepare this piece of meat, this piece of chaylev for him. Amalei said, Bavlaat, you're probably from Bavel. I'm Bnei Yisrael. We hold that's a mutter, but you're probably from Bavel, and you hold it's aser. No, if you feel uncomfortable, gum shadi, cut it out loud, throw it out. You don't have to give it to me, because I understand that you'd be hesitant because you are from Bavel. The Bnei Bavel didn't need it. Zok the Gemara weiter. Hanya we learned. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Eimer. B'nei ayin shenikfu. What if the intestines had a hole in it? Now we know b'nei ayin shenikfu normally is a treifa, but in this case, v'leiches eismasan. There's a thick mucus that's inside the b'nei ayin, and you squeezed it out so that mucus filled the hole. My, what is the halacha? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What exactly is this mucus? It's a very thick mucus. It doesn't just leak out if there's a hole. But if you squeeze the kishka, it'll force it out. It's almost like a thick silicone that would come out. And that's the discussion. If that came out and it sealed the hole, that would cover the hole. Gemiri Chavraya the Rab Abba Merabamba. The friends of Rab Abba learned from Rab Abba. Umanu, who are we referring to as the friends of Rab Abba? We're referring to Rab Zera. Barmila, there are those who say Chavraya the Rab Zera, Merab Zera. It's Rab Zera's friends who heard it from Rab Zera. Who are Rab Zera's friends? Umani Rab Abba. At least we know the friendship was mutual. And they said over from Rab Abba Baray to Rab Chia Bar Abba. Hachika Amar. Rabbi Yochanan, this is what Rabbi Yochanan said, and we know Rabbi Yochanan is very active in paskening on shilas of treifas. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel b'treifa." He paskened like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, referring to what we just learned that b'nei ma'ayin shenikvu v'leichas eismason it's kshera. He also said the halacha Rab Shimon Bovel. There's also a halacha that Rab Shimon said regarding Hilchos Avelis that we pasken like him as well. Halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel b'treifa hodamora. That, like we just said, by the leicha that came out of the kishke. But Rab Shimon ba'avel mahi, which halacha did Rab Shimon say in Hilchos Avelis that we pass like? It's not be learned. Kol shloisha yomim harishonim. What if someone from the family did not come to Levi? He didn't start shiva with his family for whatever reason, but bo mimakom karv. But he came from a place that was close enough that he could have made it for the Levi. He just didn't. He came late. So the halacha is when he comes, he joins the family in their shiva, in their count. Moina imahin. Meaning, if they're on the third day, and he just sits with them and he counts as well from the third day. But mimakam rachik, if he came from very far away, where he could not have made it, then moina la'atzmai, then he'll start counting shiva from the day that he starts. But if he comes on the fourth day or later, no matter what, you always have to count from the beginning if you came after the third day. But Reb Shimon is mekel. He says, even if someone shows up to the last day of Shiva, if he's coming from a Makam Korev, he could finish with them. So those are the two halachas that we're passing like Reb Shimon. So Omar Mandahu, there was a Talmud, Gemara doesn't mention his name, but he said, Halavai, Iski I should be Zeicha, the Asik, I'll go up there to Yisrael, V'agramer l'shemaitza mipumei tomorrow. I'll hear directly from what Rab Abba said, Rab Chibar Abba said, I want to hear directly from him that he said, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that Allah like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. So what happened was, Kisalik, when this Talmud had the opportunity to go to Eretz Yisrael, he found him. And he asked him, Omar Mar, halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel b'treifa? Did you actually say that we pass like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel by nikfu ma'ayin? Amalei ha'ein halacha. Amri. I said the halacha is not like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and I pass in that if there's a hole in the b'nei ma'ayin, even if the leicha is plugging it, it's a treifa. What about the other halacha? Reb Shimon ben Ba'avel Mai. What about Reb Shimon Ba'avel? Amalei plugged into it. That's a machlekes as well. If we pass in like Reb Shimon Ba'avel, the itmar Reb Chista Amar halacha, the Chein Amar Reb Yochanan halacha, Reb Nachman Amar Ein halacha. So what you heard is not pashut at all. Now the Gemara fears ice. The Ein halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel b'treifa. We don't pass like Reb Shimon Gamliel by Treifa. Halacha Reb Shimon ba'avel. But we do pass like Reb Shimon Lakula by Avelus. That no matter when the oval comes, he still just joins the family count. The Yom Shmuel Halacha Kedivri Hamekel ba'avel. Avelus is the Rabban, and we go Kedivri Hamekel. Rabbi Levine, Tzadik Levracha, Rabbi Aaron Levine, wrote a sefer on Avelus. And he once asked me, why do we need this special rule of halacha kedivra mekel b'ovel? Avelus is the Rabbanan. It's always suffix to Rabbanan l'kula. You always pass like the mekel by the Rabbanan. Why is there a special psak of halacha kedivra mekel b'ovel? So he explained to me that even though you go l'kula, you never take two kulas that are tarti the sasri. As we learned, whoever wants to paskin like Basil can paskin like Bishamai can paskin, but if you want to paskin kakula de Basil like kakula de Bishamai, that's called a rosha. That's tarti the sasri. By a derabanan, even though you go lakula, but you won't go lakula by a tarti the sasri. But by a velus, Rabbi Aaron Levine told me that we go lakula even by a tarti the sasri. I wish I would have remembered the example of the tarti the sasri by a velus that Rabbi Aaron Levine told me at the time, but I don't remember. But that's what he told me. He probably had a makor for it. I don't remember the makor. I just remember that halacha kedivra mekel b'ovel is even if it's a target disaster. Amar Abshimi Bar Chia, makifin b'bnei ma'ayim. What happens if you find a hole in the intestines, but you're choshit that maybe the hole happened after the animal had died already while they were handling the b'nei ma'ayim? So what you're allowed to do is take another piece of kishka, poke a hole in it, and compare the way they look. If they look similar, then we would say that the hole that you're specific about also came after the animal was dead, and therefore it wouldn't be treifa. Hani b'nei ma'ayim d'ashlaka made a Rava. A set of b'nei ma'ayim came to Rava, and he wasn't sure when the hole happened. So what did they do? He compared it to another kishka that he made a fresh hole in. They didn't look alike, meaning that the sample that he just made now, but the suffix, he has to be makbid on that it happened while the animal was alive, and it'll be a treifa because it didn't match the fresh hole that he made in a different kitchen. But also by Mishasha Bray, or Mishasha, who was Rava's son, came, Memash Mishbahu. He started manhandling and touching and pushing and squeezing and pulling the new sample that he made. And then suddenly, now it did look alike to the suffix, which means he'd be able to be machshir. Omerlei. So Rava asked his son, Minalacha, how did you think of this trick? By manipulating it, it will now look like the sample. So he answered, the Mishash answered, it's very posh. Omerlei, Minalacha, Omerlei, Kama yodim emash mishuhu bahani v'kama delasala kamei demar. You think you're the first person who looked at this kishka? You know how many people probably were looking at this kishka and handling it with their hands? So I knew it was touched a lot. So I needed to make sure that the sample that we compare it to would have had a similar type of manipulation. And then I compared the two, and in fact, they were the same. And therefore, we were able to be machshir this animal. Zok to Gemara, Amar Lei, Rava was very proud of his son, Marbasharsha. And he said, Chacham b'ri b'treifus Rabbi Yochanan. My son is such a mumch in treifus like Rabbi Yochanan. And Rashi brings two pshatim. Either like Rabbi Yochanan is a mumch b'chol kula, or we know Rabbi Yochanan was a master of treifus, so we're comparing the knowledge of Rabbi Sharsha in treifus to the knowledge of Rabbi Yochanan in treifus. Zot Gemara weiter. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Eliezer Army, Tarvayu, Makifin Bereya. If there's a hole in the reya and you're not sure if it might have happened by mistake, when you were touching it, you could compare it to another reya that you could make a hole in, and then you could see if the holes are similar. Omerava, you would only do it on that side. So we know there's two rows on along the right side and the left side. You have to stick to the same side. You can't compare a hole on the right side to a hole that you would make on the left side because there could be a slight difference. You could compare, and even midaka ladaka, from one animal to a different animal, as long as they're both a mitaka, or umigasa lagasa, or from one animal to another animal, if they're the same type of animal. But avoloi migas l'daka, don't make a hole in the lung of a gasa to check out a daka. Avoloi midaka l'gasa. That's one pshat Rashi. The other pshat Rashi is avada. We're not talking about using two different animals. We're talking about using the lung of the same animal. And what gas l'daka means is we know that there's different lobes on the lung. There's the top lobes that are smaller, that are called unois, and then there's the two bottom chambers that are called uma. So in Rashi's second pshat, he said gas and daka. Gas is the uma, and daka is the una. Don't compare a hole in the una to a hole in the una. Okay, Zaktamar do you remember where we said where you could never compare, you never makiv? Gemara said you never makiv by bubbles. Whenever there's a bubble, there we say a makifin because the bubbles change colors. Zaktamar Vaiter. The hilchos of the halacha is afilu me'aruga la'aruga, even from the right side to the left side, midaka l'daka, if it's an una or if it's a behemadaka, depending on which shot you learn, or migas l'gasa. Avoloi migas l'daka, avoloi midaka l'gasa. Abayi v'rabbi damer tavayu makibim the kana. You could do the same thing if you have a hole in the kana. You can also compare it to another area of the kana to see if the hole looked alike or if it occurred after the animal died. Zok to Gemara. Amar Papa lo yamar no oisa cholya. Cholya is a set of 3 rings. We know the kana is made up of a series of rings. In the same cholya, within 3 rings, you could check close by. The cholya is a thick part of the ring, which faces the outside of the neck. The back of the kana, we know, the rings get thinner and thinner when they get to the back, and then they're connected with a piece of meat. So the bar cholya is the thin part of the kana. There, you cannot check from there to the cholya. So with bar cholya, you could check. If you want to compare 2 kanas together, it has to be the similar part. Amar Ziri chalchula shenikva. What about the what's it called? The colon of the animal that got a hole in it. Now the colon passes through a very tight spot that's surrounded by bone. On top, it's surrounded by the spine, and on either side, it's surrounded by the hip bone or the tailbone. So the colon is almost like a wooden chamber that has a lining in it that's called the colon. So what if there the colon was ruptured, but it's still in that case, that bone case? Because it's still very much contained in the case, and none of the feces are going to back up. It's only going to go out the back. It's not going to drop in because the bones don't let it. The kama, how much could be missing? That'll be kosher. The part that's connected in the bones, even if roy is missing, it's going to be kosher, but because again, nothing will be able to escape. None of the ray will be able to escape. And what about if it's not where it's surrounded by bone? Amar, and he said, I'm sorry. So even if roiv is missing, you'll be okay. It'll be possible with a mashu. And he said, Amar, the Rava said, you're telling me nonsense. Didn't I really tell you once? Don't hang on nonsense. In other words, what you're saying is not true. So let me turn on to Amad Beis. Look at the book Shriki. Rashi says it means kadam reikin. Don't hang on to nonsense. It's not true what you're saying. Hachi Amar Reb Nachman. This is what Reb Nachman said. Mokam hadevek afilu nizal kulei kosher. Not only if roiv is missing, even if there's no colon left, all you have is the bone channel, it will be kosher. As long as there's a tiny little bit of colon left, So basically, what he said is you don't need a colon; even a semicolon would be enough. V'chama, and how much has to be there? Zok Gemara, Amar Abaye Kamolei Badeta Betura. Even in a big ox, all you need is the size of one little finger, meaning the vast majority of the colon disintegrated, the animal will still be exer. Hakeres hapnimi. Now we had a lot of discussion about hakeres hapnimi already because we were discussing earlier, a couple of blocks ago, about the veshet or the veshet. The veshet connects to the keres, and we said the keres hapnimi is considered like the veshet and nikva is b'mashu. Unlike the rest of the stomach, it has to be nikra rubai. It has to be a big cut in order for it to be a treifa. So we had a shaila: is the keres hapnimi the last tefach of the veshet? So one tefach away from the keres, or is it the first tefach inside the keres? We had that discussion already, but now we're going to have it again. Hakeres hapnimi Amar B'Yehuda Amarav Heid Nosen Bar Shila Reish Tefachaya Tzipari L'fnei Rebbe Mishum Rav Nosen Ezo Keres hapnimi Sanya Divi. It's a part of the animal. It's called the Sanya Divi. Now, Sanya Divi can be translated as the piece of meat that's even hated by the wolves. Meaning, if the wolves captured this part of the veshet, it's such a icky piece that they actually bring it back. It's hated by the wolves. That was one shot. The other shot is it's the area of the stomach that when they would normally cut open an animal, they'd cut open that area of the stomach to get rid of the parish inside, the smelly stuff inside. So it's the area where they would open up. The Rabbi Shmuel is tumcho de karsa. You know which part is the part that if it was nikav, it's b'mashu. It's a different part. It's istumcha de karsa. Rashi says, I don't know exactly what that part is referring to. I'll tell you what it's referring to. It's referring to the place where the keres gets, where it tapers down to join the veshet. Makam tzar yesh b'keres. The Eini Yodea Ezahu, I don't know exactly which one that is, and Reb Nachman clarified. Reb Nachman Yitzchok, Nafal Karsa Babira. Nachman said, it seems like there's a big black hole, because we're discussing a part of the keres that Nika B'mashu, it'll be a treifa. Nobody knows what it is. It's a black hole. The keres fell into a big black hole. Amar Bacha by Rav Ava, Amar Basi, I'll tell you what it means. Minameitzer Ulamata means from the place where the keres starts tapering towards the veshet, that is Nika B'mashu, will be a treifa. It's makam she'ein by melas. Inside the stomach, there's a it looks like hairs, like fibers. There, right where it gets close to the veshet, it doesn't have it anymore. So that's as the din of veshet, nika b'mashu will be a treifa. Ravina Amar Gediva Mishmei Rav Tefach b'veshet samuch l'keres. He keres hapnimi. It's a tefach in the veshet, the last tefach of the veshet. That's considered keres hapnimi. That's nika b'mashu. Ami b'marav Mishmei Rabbi Yosy bar Chanina. Kol keres kuloi. The entire keres is keres hapnimis, and it's nika b'mashu. The Mishnah says nika v'keres is not a treifa only if it's nikra ruba. Vezel keres achitain, which you need nikra ruba to passel. That's basar achoifa roiv keres. That's the meat that wraps around the keres. That's where roiv you need to be a treifa, but the keres itself, it would even be a small hole. Rabba bar Rafuna Omar mafra'ata. The mafra'ata is what is going to be puzzle. It is a small hole. My mafra'ata. What exactly is that? When they would open up the animal and cut the stomach out, it was that first part of the stomach that would come out. That would be the part that, if it's nikov, it's going to be a treifa. B'nardo avdi karabba barafuna. In Ardo, they did like Rabba barafuna, meaning the whole mafrata, that whole area there, if it was punctured, it would be a treifa. Amalei Rabashi la memar kol nishmai tzimai. you're only makbid of mafrata. What about the other opinions we had? Why aren't we concerned to say that those are also going to be a treifa if it's nikev in those other areas? All those other areas that we discussed from the other Mandamrim, they're all within the Mafrata. So if you're makbid anywhere in the Mafrata, then if there's a hole, it'll be a treifa, you cover it over everybody's shitas as well. Rabasi said, I don't know which one it is. What should we do about that one? Zok to Gemara, what do you mean? Amalek for Pisher Rabacha bar Abba. Rabacha bar Abba was Mefarish what it was referring to, and the 10 minute Lamata, which is also included in the Mafarata. So we don't need to worry about that. What about Ravina and Rav, who also specify different parts of the stomach? Those taka are not in the Mafarata, and in fact, those are a different shot. But the Mafarata includes all the other shotim except for Ravina and the Bnei Marava. Ravina said from Geneva that Tevach Meveshet, that's taka not the same area as the Mafrata, and the Bnei Marava said Kala Keres Kulai, that's also not like the Mafrata. Zok to Gemara Vayta. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer Bigdoila. So Rabbi Yehuda said, if it's a big animal, then it's only a tefach. It doesn't have to be roiv. It's only have to be nikra if it's a smaller animal. If it's a larger animal, even a tefach, so that the smaller of the two, roiv or a tefach. Amar b'yamim b'yafes, Amar b'loser. Lo gedoyla gedoyla mamish. It doesn't literally mean we're talking about a very big animal, but like katana mamish, or a small animal. It all depends on how big the stomach is. Any animal where if even there's a tear of a tefach in its stomach, it's still not roiv. That's zuhi sheshaninu b'gedoyla tefach. That's what we meant b'gedoyla tefach, meaning that a tefach will passel even though a tefach is not a roiv. Okay, gewaltig. Ruba v'loy have a tefach, or if it's roiv and it's not a tefach, meaning what if you can cut roiv of the stomach and it still won't be a tefach, meaning it's a small stomach. Zui shashaninu piktana beruba. That's what we meant, that by a smaller animal it's roiv. Ruba v'loy have a tefach. Frankly, if it's roiv and it's not a tefach, shita, isn't it pashit that should be a treifa because it's roiv. Ruba kakulai. So it's v'loy tricha. The have a tefach b'mashu. What if a drop more than roiv was a tefach? Maybe it wouldn't be treifa since you're almost at a tefach with roiv. Maybe it wouldn't be a treifa until it's a tefach. Ma'adetema ad mikra ba tefach lo have a treifa kamashmala. No, even there roiv alone will make it into a treifa. Now Tosfos asks, why would you have such a havamina? Roiv rubik akulai. What's the difference if a little bit more would be a tefach? If roiv was ripped, then it should be a treifa. So Tosfos has a slightly different shot. Amar Geniva, Amar Basi. Niktira Kisela treifa. What if there's a round hole in the stomach? But it's not a ruba and it's not a tefach. It's a round hole. It's not a slice. But she'im timtach, if you stretch out the hole from a circle and you would make it a long straight line, then tamad la tefach. Then it would be a tefach. What would the halacha be? The halacha is it's a treifa. Amar b'chia bar Abba, l'didim mifresh laminate the Geneva. I got a clarity in what Geneva said. Where was I standing when I got that clarity? I'm mavrid in Narada. When I was on the bridge of Narada, we were shmuzing and learning, and we were discussing this tarvus. And we said ksela kshera. If it's exactly the size of a sela, then it still would be kosher. Yasemi kesela, if it's a drop more than a sela, then it's treifa, that's going to be able to stretch out to be a tefach. The chama yasemi kesela, how big is that? Can you give me, they didn't have tape measures to measure, can you give me using common items so I could figure out if it's big enough to be a problem of a treifis? Or maybe I said very simple. Take 3 date pits and line them up side by side in this hole. If going to island Tlas Keshyasa, Betzipa beduchka. If they fit in, but they're very tight in there, that's going to be big enough. Ubeloi tzipa. Now, sometimes when you eat a date, there'll be some little pieces left on the pit. You don't completely lick the pit clean. So if you had a completely clean pit, then baracha, if they could fit into the hole even loosely, that's a sign that this hole is big enough that it's going to be a treifa. Okay, let's just learn two more lines. Taner Rabbanon, hamster basic oises. Taner Rabbanon, machat shenimtzes b'oiva basic oises. If you found a machat in the wall of the basic oises, but it wasn't punctured all the way through, mitzarech ksher, but mishnei tzad, if it's punctured all the way through, it's treifa. Nimtzala kared dam. Now, how do we know if the hole occurred before the animal died or after? If there's blood around that hole, the yadua, then we know for sure that this happened while the animal was still alive. The Gemara says if you didn't find the kared dam, then the hole probably happened after the baby had died, and therefore it's not a treifa. Okay, Bezos, we'll stop here. I mentioned tomorrow, Itcha Bergman was agreeable to say the shir, so Itcha will say the shir tomorrow, an hour before Mincha. Okay, good Shabbos, everybody. Beautiful, wonderful Shabbos. So, did I understand correctly that Gershon Weinstock had a heart attack while he was driving last night?
That's what I only heard that he died in a car accident. Shmuel said that he had a heart attack.